What's up, Inspired Vision, plus anybody I might be catching on YouTube? We are on day 5 of our Accelerated Algebra I course, and this is the summer school course to get us ready for STAAR. So, we are solving linear equations for y. We're writing equations given 2 points, or given a slope in a single point, or finding the equations of a graph. So, as always, it is time to learn some math. So let's get ready for this STAAR test. Now, that STAAR test is coming on July 12th. This video is meant for June 13th. So we basically have 3 more weeks to prepare, plus 2 more review days. Now, here's how today's is going to work. We have 4 review questions from last week. We're going to do 9 guided practice questions, and then 9 questions where I want you to work on your own, and then 1 STAAR test where we're going to put everything together. And we are working on TEKS 8.3, which is from reporting category 2, which 12 of your STAAR questions come from. Now, make sure you subscribe so you can get ready for these STAAR tests and be able to get all of the videos that will help you prepare. Okay, here is our first question. This question's coming from last week, but the skills needed for this question are similar skills that we're going to use today. So we have -5 times 5x plus 3 in parentheses, then minus 2x minus 3 equals 2. The very first thing we're going to do is remember our steps, and these shapes are representations of our steps. And our first step is to distribute. So we're going to take this -5 and multiply by 5x, and then multiply times positive 3. So -5 times 5x becomes -25x, and then -5 times 3 becomes -15. And then we're going to bring down everything else. Now next, if we follow the order of these steps, we're not going to need to clear our fractions because we don't have fractions in this problem, but we are going to need to combine like terms. That's what these circles mean. So our like terms right now are the -25x and the -2x, and they're on the same side of the equation. So when we combine them together, we're just doing -25 minus 2, that becomes -27x. Now, something a little different is we're also going to combine numbers that are on the same side of the equation. So that is going to be -15 and -3, or -3. That combines together to be -18. And then we still have that equal to 2. Now next, we're going to work down and we're going to set up what our rectangle and our triangle are. And remember that our rectangle always goes next to our x, to the left, what's in front of it, its coefficient. And a triangle if we have anything else on that side of the equation that x is on. So right now our rectangle is -27, our triangle is -18. Then we always do the opposite of the triangle first, which since that's -18, we're going to do +18 to get rid of it, because we always add or subtract to get rid of our triangle. So if I do +18 on the other side of the equation, then I'm going to have -27x equals 20. Finally, our last step is always to get rid of the rectangle last, and we get rid of it using division. We never change the sign when we divide, so we divide by -27. So if you're using your calculator, you're doing 20 in your calculator first, divided by -27 in your calculator second. And that's going to give you a crazy decimal, -0.7407. It keeps repeating. So we know that we can use our calculator doing math enter to change that decimal into a fraction, which is -20 over 27. Okay, that's our first question. Second question. We are remembering what to do with fractions. So we have the fraction of 1/9 plus x over 6 equals 2/3. Okay, now we're still going to follow our steps. So our first step stands for distributing. We don't need to distribute in this problem because there's no parentheses. Our second step, we have to remember what to do with fractions, and it has 3 mini steps. Its first step is to make everything a fraction, which right now everything is a fraction. Second step is to multiply all terms by the LCD. So I need to figure out what the LCD is. If I look at my denominators, I have 9, 6, and 3. So if I make a list, always start with your biggest number, whatever your biggest exponent is. And 6 doesn't go into 9, but 6 does go into 18, which is what 9 times 2 is. So that makes 18 my LCD. So the rule here is take the whole equation. We're allowed to do this because we have an equation, and multiply 18 times all of my numerators. If I multiply 18 times 1, then that's going to become 18 over 9. I keep the same denominator. Then I have 18 over x, 18 times x, and I'm going to put that over 6, like this. And then I have to multiply the other side of the equation too, because that's how you clear fractions. 18 times 2 is 36, and then I put that over 3. Okay? Now, next, we're supposed to reduce. If we reduce, we just divide. So 18 divided by 9 is 2. 18x divided by 6 becomes 3x. And 36 divided by 3 is 12. Now, this is what we have now. This is much easier to handle than our fraction to begin with. We also do not have like terms in this problem. So the next step is to set up our rectangle and our triangle. Our rectangle is the number that's in front of x, which in this case is not my first term like the last problem. This time my rectangle is going to be the positive 3. And since I still have another term on that side that x is on, which x is on the left this time, then I'm going to put a triangle around the 2. Now next, we always get rid of our triangle. So right now, this is kind of tricky to see, but this is a positive 2. So the opposite of the triangle is negative 2. So we need to do negative 2 on the other side. Never ever put it underneath your rectangle because we're trying to solve for x. So that means we're going to have 3x equals 10. Now, to get rid of our rectangle, we divide. So we divide by 3. And then if we're using a calculator, 10 divided by 3 is 3.3 repeating. If I hit math enter, it's 10/3. Or if I'm trying to convert it to a mixed fraction, then it's 3 1/3. And the reason why I know that is because if I use popcorn or do 3 times 3 is 9 plus 1, that's 10 over 3. So it's the same fraction. That's improper, that's mixed. But 3 different ways to say the same thing. Let's move on to number 3. Number 3, we have negative 3 parentheses 8x plus 4, close parentheses, less than negative 24. So the first thing that should be staring at you is, what is this symbol? That symbol is an inequality. Whenever you're dealing with inequalities, which we'll deal more with inequalities tomorrow, we have to remember there's 2 reasons why we need to flip that symbol. Reason number 1, we're going to flip whenever there's a negative in our rectangle, but we can't set up our rectangle unless we get through these steps first. Number 2, we're going to flip if x is on the right side. The reason why is look at all my answer choices. They all have x on the left side. So if we are solving a problem and x comes down to be on the right side at the very end, we need to flip our symbol to make it on the left side. Okay, so we're going to treat this problem the same. The first thing we're going to do, since we have parentheses, is to distribute. So negative 3 times 8x, that's going to become negative 24x. Then negative 3 times 4 is negative 12. Okay? We do not have fractions or like terms in this problem. So we now are going to set up our rectangle and our triangle. Solving for x, so the rectangle is going to be the negative 24. Triangle in this problem is going to be the negative 12. Okay? So far the same. Always get rid of the triangle first. So since that's a negative 12, we're going to do plus 12 on both sides of the equation, not underneath the rectangle. That's bad. We're just going to move it over to the other side. And then we can combine this together on the right side, negative 24 plus 12, and that's going to become negative 12. So here's our problem now. Now our last step is to get rid of this number in front of x by dividing. And because we're dividing by a negative number, we'll get to that in a second. But negative 12 divided by negative 24 comes out to be 0.5. Now, let's talk about the reasons why we flip again. That's the reason why I didn't write this symbol yet. We flip when there's a negative in our rectangle. Negative in the rectangle means we're dividing by a negative number. That's exactly what we did. So we need to take this less than symbol and make it into a greater than symbol. And this is our answer. Well, none of our answers are in decimals, but if we convert 0.5 into a fraction, it is 1/2. So that's our answer for this one. Okay, again, more inequalities tomorrow. Here's what we're focused on today. Solving for y. All right, we did cover solving for y on day 3, but we only had 2 of those examples. We're going to be doing a lot of solving for y today. So we have -5, parentheses, negative y plus 2x, close parentheses, plus 8 equals 13. We're going to follow our steps. So the first step is to distribute. Okay, so distribute, we're going to do -5 times -y, and that's going to become positive 5y. Why? Because it's negative 5 times a -1. That's the number that's in front of negative y. So a negative times a negative becomes a positive. So now it's positive 5y. Then we do -5 times 2x. That's going to become minus 10x. And then we can bring everything else down. All right, I jumped ahead of myself here. This is my second step. I don't have fractions in this problem. Okay, what I do need to do is combine like terms. Now this is something interesting. Whenever you solve for y and you have numbers on both sides of the equation, you need to combine them. Well, it's just easier if you think about combining them. So the way you combine them is actually to move the positive 8 over to the right side of the equation because we're solving for y. I'm actually going to explain this a little bit better as we go on through this course. But for now, and this doesn't happen on any problem we're doing today, but for now, just believe me when I say we need to move this 8 over. And if we move that 8 over, the way we move it over is to do its opposite, which is -8 on both sides of the equation. So when we do 13 minus 8, we're going to have a 5. We still bring down the 5y and the -10x. Now let's set up our rectangle and our triangle. Now this time, you got to keep in mind we're solving for y. So our rectangle goes not at the -10 that's in front of x, but because we're solving for y, it goes on this positive 5 in front of the y. And then my triangle is the -10x because it's still the other term that's on the same side as y. Now, just like every time we have a triangle, we need to move it first by doing its opposite. So if this says -10x, its opposite is plus 10x. And we need to do that to the other side. That's how to get rid of that. Now, here's something that a lot of people make mistakes on. When we move the 10x over to the other side, that does not become 15 or 15x. The thing is, whenever you're solving for y and you're moving over your x term, you don't have like terms when you move this over. So that means you cannot add these together. The only thing we can do is write these side by side. So that means we have 5y equals 5 plus 10x. The first time people see this, their mind is blown. But hopefully you're going to be on track every time you solve for y to look for that. Okay, now, just like before, we need to get rid of this 5 that's in front of y, so we are going to divide. But since we have 2 terms, we're going to divide each term by 5. Meaning, 5 divided by 5 is 1, 10x divided by 5 is 2x. So again, keep this in mind. Anytime we start off with x and y in the equation, you're going to get an equation at the end. That equation is going to be in the format of y equals mx plus b. This is in that format. It's just switched. My x is second, but it's still in that format. All right, so this is your equation. Keep that in mind on everything that we're doing today. Okay, now we're going to do our guided practice questions. I accidentally have the answer here, but that's okay. We're guiding through it. So the way that this is going to work is I'm going to show you all of your independent practice questions you're going to get in a minute, the 9 that you're doing on your own, and I'm going to walk you through step by step of how to get to the answers. So this question is asking which equation represents the line that passes through these points. Now, the way that you need to handle anytime you have 2 points is to use your stat key. And the way that you can use your stat key is get your calculator out. Your stat key is this key right here. Then, so hit it and hit enter. Then it's going to pull up 2 rows, or 2 columns, L1, L2, and you're going to type in your points that they gave you, 0, 9, and 3, 6. It's very important that you keep your 0 and your 9 side by side because L1 stands for X, L2 stands for Y. And then you put 3, 6 side by side. And 3 stands for L1, which is X, 6 stands for L2, which is Y. Okay? Now, does it matter if you put 3, 6 on top and 0, 9 on the bottom? No. What does matter is if you accidentally switch this up and put 0, 3 here and 9, 6 here, or however, yeah, that's probably how you would do it if you messed it up. So it's very important to keep your X's and your Y's in the right columns. All right, now, next thing you do is after you have this screen is to do stat, right arrow over to calculate, and go down to number 4 and hit enter. Or if you have 85 or TI 84 plus, you would hit enter about 5 times. And then you're pulling up, here it is. Stat, go over to calculate, go down to number 4 at linear regression and hit enter. And then you should have an equation that looks like this. Now, the beauty of your stat key is anytime you're given 2 points, you can do this. And your equation's right here on the calculator screen. Now, if you notice, it's in the format of AX plus B. That is the same format that I showed you previously, which is MX plus B. All we have to do is plug in the number for A and plug in the number for B. So A is -1, B is 9. I followed the format of AX plus B. And then my answer choice, they just didn't write the 1. But since they kept the negative sign, there's an understood -1 in front of X. So that's my first answer. These are your easy questions for today. Let's see how your hard questions work for today. Harder questions. This time, we're asked to find an equation again. This time we're given a slope of 4, and we're passing through the point -5, -3. Now, you cannot use stats for this problem because we did not get 2 points. So what we need to do is solve each answer choice and then see if it passes through this point. I'm actually going to show you another way as well, but most likely you're going to want to solve each answer choice. So if you look at A, you first need to distribute this 4 to the X and 4 to the 5, meaning you're going to get 4X plus 20 on the right side. On the left side, you can just bring this down. Now keep in mind, whenever you're doing an equation, you want to solve for Y. So if I'm solving for this Y, the imaginary 1 that's in front of Y is your rectangle. Triangle is the -3. Basically, all that means is all I need to do to solve for Y is to add 3 on both sides. Now, I'm not going to add 3 to the 4X because those are not like terms. I can only add 3 to the 20, meaning your Y is going to be 4X plus 23. Now, I could divide both of these terms by 1, but it's still going to be this. Now, your question now is, does this have this point? The only way we would know is if we type that into our Y equals key. So if you pull up your Y equals key, type that in. Remember, your Y equals key is on the top left. Type this in and hit second graph. If you pull up the table and go to -5, we see +3. Well, we need -3. That means A was close, but not it. So A is not our answer. Okay, we would do the same thing for each one of these answer choices. This is one way to do it. Another way to do it is to think about y equals mx plus b and see that they gave us the slope. The slope is 4. So we could substitute 4 in for our m or for our a. It's really the same thing. And then solve for b. The way we would solve for b is we would use the point that they gave me, -5, -3, and plug that in for x right here and for y. So after I multiply these together, I now have -3 equals -20 plus b. Now to solve for b, I would move the 20 over to the other side, giving me 17. And then I would take that answer plus the slope they already gave me and plug that into my equation, and my equation would be y equals 4x plus 17. Now again, you don't have to do it this way. This is just the way if you weren't using your y equals key in your table. Now if you notice, these two equations don't match. So then I would go to b, which I would have to go to b regardless of which way you're doing this problem. If I go to b and distribute, you now have 4x plus 20, just like the first problem, because it's the same thing on the right side. Now what's different is it says plus 3. So to get rid of this positive 3, I would have to subtract 3 on both sides, meaning that I would now have y equals 4x plus 17, which is exactly what I'm trying to match to. But if you didn't do this on the bottom, you would plug this in your y equals key and then look at the table and now see that you have -5, -3, which is what we're trying to get to. So B is my answer for this one. Okay, number 3. This time I am given an equation that passes through 2 points. 2 points make me happy because 2 points I can use the stat key. So I'm going to take both of these points, put them in a stat. So I'm going to say 1, 9 and L1, L2, -2, 21 and L1, L2. Then I'm going to do stat calc 4. And now I have my equation. So the way I could write this equation is -4 for my a, which is -4x, and then plus 13. Now the tricky thing about this problem is none of my answer choices are written like that. This is what we're trying to get to, but none of my answer choices are written like that. So if you take a look at a, it has on the left side parentheses y minus 9. Now there is no reason at all for this parentheses on the left side. So you can just say it's y minus 9. Now on the right side, you could distribute that -4 to the x and then -4 to the -1, making it positive 4 now. Now if I was solving for y on a, then I would need to move this -9 over by doing plus 9 on both sides. So my equation, because I can only add those together, will become -4x plus 13. Now that's exactly what I'm trying to get to. So I don't need to keep going. But if this wasn't an exact match, then I would need to keep going till I find an exact match to what was in my stat key. Okay? All right, number 4. Number 4, they love these type of questions on STAAR. They love to give you a graph and then ask you the equation of the line. Now, the very easiest way to do this is to also use your stat key because they gave you 2 points. Now, I realize you could use rise over run and y-intercept, but the stat key works, and I see that students usually make less mistakes if they use the stat key. So, using the stat key, you would pick a point. It doesn't matter if you go from bottom to top or top to bottom, as long as you keep your x and y's together and your x and y's together. And you do stat calc 4, and you have this. Now, I have a slope of 0.75. None of my answers are in decimal format, so I would need to convert 0.75 into a fraction. Also, what I have is a negative number for b. Now, look at what you're maybe tempted to write. You may be tempted to write plus -2 in your equation, but there's a rule in math that you never want to write plus negative a number. Whenever this comes up, you just want to write minus that number. Okay? Now, that 0.75, if you convert it to a fraction, is the same thing as 3/4. So now I have that answer. All right, moving on. This time, we have another equation where we need to write, and we're given 2 points. We're given -9, 0 and 0, 2. So since we have 2 points, we're going to use our stat key. But when we use our stat key and do stat calc 4, we're going to get the slope of 0.22222 repeating. A lot of 2's. Now here's something very careful. You can leave it in this format and you'll actually be fine. But if you attempt to make it into a fraction, I've showed you 2 ways I attempted to make this into a fraction. The first way, I took a guess how many 2's were repeating, and I tried to convert it into a fraction, and my calculator didn't think that I was trying to do a repeating 2, and it said that that was the decimal. So basically couldn't convert it for me. But if I kept going and wrote more 2's, then it figured out that I was trying to write a repeating 2, and then it converted it into a fraction. Now again, you can get this answer right without knowing what the fraction is, because when I go and solve each one of these answer choices, I'm going to be looking for the slope, or the number in front of x, that has 0.2 repeating, or 2/9 if we convert it to a fraction. All right, moving on. If you take a look at A, and we're solving for y, then the number in front of y would be my rectangle. My triangle is 2x, and the triangle always moves first. And this is kind of tricky. To get rid of that triangle, you would have to know that there's an imaginary plus sign in front of that 2, so we need to subtract 2x on both sides. Now keep in mind what I showed you at first is when we subtract 2x from both sides, we cannot combine these together when we solve for y. So we're going to write the -18 minus 2x side by side, like this. Then we need to get rid of the -9 in front of y, and we always divide by the number that's our last number, by a rectangle. So if we divide by -9, then we're going to have -18 divided by -9 comes out to be +2. And then -2 divided by -9, because you're not going to type x in the calculator, you're just going to remember to bring it down, becomes +2/9 x. Or if you type it in your calculator, it's 0.222 repeating. So that's what I was trying to say. If you didn't know how to convert that, you'll be okay, because this is the same answer. It's just switched. And as long as I keep the same number in front of my x, which is 2/9, then that's my same answer. And then the number that doesn't have an x is +2. Okay, moving on to number 6, which is our last problem that I'm showing you together. And then I'm going to want you to try some of these problems on your own. So on number 6, we have a slope. They gave us a fraction. That can be kind of scary when they give us a fraction. And then they gave us a point. So my only option here, or one of the better options here, is to distribute my -7/4 and then see which of the answer choices have that point, -3, 7. So if I distribute -7/4 to x, I'm going to get -7/4x. You can make that a decimal if you want. And for sure, I'm going to make this a decimal, because that way you're not scared by the fraction. So -7/4 times -3, that becomes +5.23. Or sorry, 5.25. Now, if you take a look at this problem, we still need to solve for x, because whenever we have an equation, solve for y. Whenever we have an equation, we always want to solve for y. So to solve for y, we're going to get rid of this +7 by moving it over to the other side by doing -7. Again, because it's my triangle, so I want to move it by doing plus or minus, so we're going to do -7 on both sides. Now, 5.25 minus 7 becomes negative or minus 1.75. Now, here is an equation. We now want to type it into our y equals key. If we type it in our y equals key and then look at the table, at -3, I don't have 7. So that means A is not my answer choice. So I want to do the same thing with B. So if I distribute this -7/4 times +3, that becomes -5.25. And to get rid of the +7 on the left side, just like I did over here, I'm going to do minus 7 on both sides. So in my calculator, I'm typing in negative 5.25 minus 7, and that becomes negative 12.25 or minus 12.25. Then I go to type this in my y equals key. I type that as a negative, that as a minus, go to the table, and then I see at negative 3, I see negative 7. That is not the same answer. It's getting closer, but not the same answer. So again, I go to C. This is what you're going to have to do sometimes. You have to work through all of your answer choices. Do negative 7 over 4 times x, and then negative 7 over 4 times plus 3. Now that is the same thing as right here, so that means I should have the same thing. So negative 7 over 4x minus 5.25. Now this time, I have a minus 7 on the left side. So I have to add 7 on both sides. If you type this in your calculator as negative 5.25 times plus 7, it comes out to be positive 1.75. Type that into your y equals key, look at the table, and now you see your match. So it's going to be C. All right. I know this was a challenging lesson today, but now I want you to try on your own a little bit. So here are 3 questions. I'm going to show you 9 questions. I want you to try each one of these 9. I need you to pause the video and write down the keywords of these problems, or try them on paper real quick, or take a screenshot, because I'm about to change the screen in about 10 seconds. And I'm going to want you to try these on your own. Okay, here comes the next 3 questions, so same deal. Pause the video, work these questions out, or take a screenshot, work it out. Moving on in 5 seconds. And here we go. Last 3 questions I want you to try on your own. Okay, moving on. So, the first question asked us to find the equation of the line that passes the points. I wanted you to start off pretty easy. So if you take use your stat key, do stat calc 4, you should have 0.4 minus 14 as your answer. Now 0.4 is the same thing as 2/5, so your answer should be C. Okay? Second question. We're trying to get the equation of the line. The first thing we need to do is actually know what this equation is. So if I use my stat key, you should have negative 5x minus 10 as your equation. Now, none of my answers are like that. So that means I need to go through each answer or choice and see which one is this. Okay, I'm about to show you each one of these answer choices worked out. So if on A, I'm going to have to move over the negative 5x first, divide by negative 1, and you're going to have 10 plus 5x. That is almost the answer, because I was looking for negative 5 plus 10 or minus 10, and this one's the opposite. They're both positive. On B, I'm going to want to move over the negative 1x over, or do its opposite, that'd be minus 1x, then divide by negative 5, but then negative 1 divided by negative 5 makes this 0.2 or 1/5, so I'm actually getting further away. Same thing with C, it's because I'm dividing by the 5 that's in front of y. So that's kind of a clue why B and C are not the answer, because I have to divide by that number that's in front of y. Okay, so I would have to subtract 1x on both sides, divide by positive 5 this time, and now I have negative 2 minus 1/5 x. Now on D, I subtract negative 5x on both sides, divide by a positive 1, that's not going to change anything, but now I have my answer as negative 10 minus 5x. It's the same as this, because you're going to keep your x with the A with your slope. Okay, same thing. Okay, on B, if I use my stat key, I have this. Now my answer is a decimal, 1.5. 1.5 is the same thing as 3 over 2, but you can get the answer without knowing that. You have to do the same thing. You have to take each answer choice and solve it. So the first thing I'm going to do on A is subtract 3x on both sides, then divide 12 by negative 2, which is going to be negative 6, and negative 3 divided by negative 2 comes out to be positive 1.5. So I didn't keep going because A was the answer on this one. All right, here is number 4. Number 4, they just want the equation of this line. So you could use rise over run and then your y-intercept, or you can use your stat key. If you use your stat key, you're going to see 0.33 repeating. 0.33 repeating is the same thing as 1/3, but you can tell that this is positive and this B is positive, so it has to be this answer, which is D. Number 5, if you type this in the stat, you're going to get 4x plus 15. None of my answer choices are worked out as 4x plus 15. So you're going to take each answer choice, and with A, you're going to drop this parentheses, distribute on the right side, add 2 to the negative 28, and you have negative 4x minus 26. Not the same answer. On B, you're going to subtract 7 from the positive 8, which was almost my answer, by the way, and that becomes positive 1. So that's going to be negative 4x plus 1. On C, after you distribute, you're going to add 7 to the 8, and now I have the 15, and now you have your answer. Okay, number 6. This time they gave me a slope and a point. So I'm going to need to work out each one of these answer choices and then see if it has that point. Or another way to do this problem is to substitute 1.5 for your slope and then plug in 2 for your x, negative 8 for your y. So you get your B, which is negative 11. So this is the more advanced way to do the question. The easier way to do the question is distribute 3/2 times x, which is 1.5x, or 3/2 x, and then 3/2 times 2 is going to become negative 3. If you move the plus 8 over to the other side by doing subtracting 8, you now have minus 11. If you were to type this into your y equals key and look at the table, you see this point, or you see that it matches up to this that's worked out. Okay, that's probably the hardest question. Number 7. Number 7, we need an equation. So this is going to be negative 3x plus 3. We need to work out each one of these answer choices. And the answer choice that's going to work out is D. And the reason why is because I'm subtract 3x on both sides, divide by 1, and now I have the same thing. Okay, on 8, I want to get my equation, which is 0.25 plus 1. None of my answer choices have that. But if I work them all out, then on C, I'm going to subtract 1x on both sides, divide by negative 4, and now I have the same thing as what I got in my stat key. Okay, finally, number 9. Type this into stat. I have negative 0.5 plus 19. I'm looking for the one that is the same thing as negative 0.5. Negative 0.5 is the same thing as negative 1/2 plus 19, and now my answer is A. Okay, almost finished for today. We're going to do one star question that uses the same skills that we've learned today. Just one. So I couldn't pick one that was all-encompassing, but here is one. Okay? Now, this question says, which table shows the same rate of change? We need to know that rate of change means slope. Slope is the number that's in front of x. It's also helpful to know that this negative 5/8 is negative 0.625, because here's what's we're going to need to do. We're going to need to type each one of these tables into our stat key and then see which one has negative 6.25 as my slope. So if I do A, type it in the stat, and my L1, L2 looks like this, then do StatCalc 4, you can see that that's not it. That's not the same slope. My slope would be 4 in this case. Okay, B, if I do L1, L2, then type it, do my linear regression. They're trying to trick you here by saying that my B is 4, so they're trying to see if you know what rate of change means. Now, we don't care that the B is the same. We just care that the slope is the same, and that is not the same. Negative 1.6 is not the same. Okay, C, type that in L1, L2. then stack out 4, and now we see that we have the same slope. We have the same A. And B is not the same at all. Okay, so that means this answer is C. Okay, hopefully you got something out of today. We're going to be working more on this tomorrow. So I know this is a very important concept in algebra. So stay tuned. Check when I upload the next video. And until then, thank you.